Jake was 19, a college freshman fresh off his first year at university. Quiet, observant, and often lost in thought, he was the kind of guy who avoided drama and preferred books over parties. He didn't have many close friends, but the few he had he valued deeply. At the top of that list was Mark. Mark had been Jake's best friend since middle school. Where Jake was quiet, Mark was loud. Where Jake was cautious, Mark dove in headfirst. Confident, athletic, and popular without trying, Mark often brought Jake into his world: sports games, weekend hangouts, summer barbecues. They were opposites, but their bond worked like gravity, impossible to break. And then there was Diane, Mark's mom. Early 40s, classy, with an air of calm elegance that made people pause. She'd gone through a messy divorce just a year earlier and had been rebuilding her life ever since. To Jake, she was always warm, welcoming, and nurturing in a way his own fractured family life lacked. But lately, there had been something else beneath that warmth. Something lingering in her glances. Something unspoken. It was summer break, and with no job and not many plans, Jake found himself spending more time at Mark's house than his own. The place had become a second home, a safe haven from his own mother's string of boyfriends and his father's silence since the divorce. Mark's house was alive with energy. Music always played in the background, video games buzzed in the living room, and the smell of something baking seemed to always hang in the air. But it was Diane who gave the house its warmth. She always made time to chat with Jake, ask about school, offer him a plate of whatever she was cooking, even if Mark was nowhere around. At first, it felt like simple kindness. Over time, it felt different. She started complimenting his cologne, telling him he was growing into a handsome man, letting her hand rest a little too long on his shoulder. Her hugs lingered. The way she looked at him when Mark wasn't paying attention, it stirred something inside Jake that both confused and excited him. One Friday evening, Mark was heading out of town for a weekend beach trip with cousins. Jake had planned to join but bailed last minute, saying he needed to catch up on summer class assignments. As Mark pulled out of the driveway, he shouted, "Later, man. Don't let my mom adopt you while I'm gone." Jake laughed it off. A few hours later, he realized he still had Mark's psychology textbook in his backpack. Wanting to return it before it got buried in his stuff, he walked the familiar 2 blocks to Mark's house. The sun had dipped, casting long shadows on the sidewalk. He knocked on the door, expecting the usual cheerful greeting. Instead, the door opened slowly, revealing Diane in casual lounge clothes, shorts, an off-the-shoulder tee, and a glass of wine in hand. The lighting behind her was dim, the house oddly quiet. She didn't smile right away. She just looked at him, long enough to make him aware of every heartbeat in his chest. Then she leaned slightly forward and whispered, "Come in. I'm alone." Jake froze, his hand still on the strap of his backpack. 1,000 thoughts swirled in his head. This was just Mark's mom. Just Diane. Right? But nothing about her voice or her eyes said this was casual. His instinct screamed for him to turn around, to make some excuse to go home. But he didn't move. Not yet. Jake had always been a quiet kid. The kind who sat near the window in class, drawing in the margins of his notebooks instead of raising his hand. His parents divorced when he was 10, and since then, he'd developed a subtle but constant hunger for emotional safety, something stable, something that didn't disappear overnight. His father moved to another state, started a new family, and rarely called. His mother, though loving in her own way, cycled through relationships that often left the house more chaotic than comforting. Jake learned early how to retreat into himself. Books, music, the occasional sketchpad, they all gave him a sense of control. That's part of why Mark's friendship meant so much. At Mark's house, everything felt lighter. There was laughter. Order. A sense of home that Jake's own life lacked. And at the center of that was Diane. She wasn't just a friend's mom, she was gentle, graceful, and always seemed to notice when Jake was off. When Jake's dog died during senior year, it was Diane who found him sitting on the porch, staring into nothing. She sat down beside him and didn't say much, just put a hand on his back and stayed. That night, she made him tea and let him talk. It was a small moment, but one he never forgot. To Jake, Diane didn't just represent maternal warmth. She symbolized calm in the middle of the storm. She made him feel safe, something he craved more than he liked to admit. Mark's house had always felt like the better version of his own. Sure, it wasn't perfect, but it had a rhythm. Mark's dad had once been around, usually at work or on business trips. But a year ago he'd packed up for good, leaving Diane to pick up the pieces. Since then, the house had changed, quieter, more spacious, and at times lonelier. Jake noticed the shift, especially in Diane. She started drinking wine at night, nothing excessive, but regular. She'd often sit on the back deck alone, and when Jake was over, she'd invite him to join her. They'd talk about everything and nothing. Books, college life, music she used to love. She started to open up more, sometimes with a soft laugh and sometimes with a sigh. "This house is too big nowadays," she said once. "Too quiet. It echoes." Jake didn't know what to say, but the way she looked at him made him feel like being there was enough. Mark noticed too, though he never seemed to take it seriously. Once, after Diane had complimented Jake's new haircut and playfully tousled his hair, Mark had laughed and said, "Dude, if my mom keeps flirting with you, I'm gonna have to start charging rent." Jake laughed it off, uncomfortable but unsure why. Flirting? It couldn't be that. Diane was just kind. Caring. Wasn't she? One evening in early June, when Mark had passed out after a long day at the lake, Jake had stayed up. He wandered downstairs for water and found Diane on the patio, staring at the stars with a half-empty glass of red wine. She invited him to sit. The air was warm, cicadas humming in the distance. They talked, really talked, for the first time in weeks. Diane spoke of the marriage she'd once believed in. The nights she cried after her husband left. The fear of growing older alone. "I'm not used to silence," she'd said, voice low, eyes shining in the moonlight. "It's worse than arguing." At least arguments meant someone was still trying. Jake had no words to offer. So he simply sat there, letting her sadness pour out like rain. At one point, she placed her hand over his, not seductively, just humanly. "You're a good listener, Jake," she whispered. "Not many people are." And in that moment, something changed. Jake didn't just see Diane as Mark's mom. He saw her as a woman, wounded, strong, and achingly human. There was an unspoken connection. It wasn't about lust, not then. It was about need. For her, someone to be seen by. For him, someone who made him feel needed. It was emotional. Intimate. And something Jake never mentioned to Mark. Let me know when you're ready for the next part, the turning point, the invitation. Jake stood at the doorway, the cool evening air brushing his back as Diane looked at him, waiting. "Come in," she repeated, more gently this time. "I'm alone." His heart pounded. Something about the way she said it, the tone, the expression on her face, it was nothing like before. There was no mistaking the weight behind her words. He stepped inside. The door closed with a soft click behind him. The house was quiet, more than usual. No TV blaring, no distant hum of the dishwasher. Just soft music playing somewhere in the background, a slow, jazzy tune that curled through the dimly lit living room like smoke. "I was about to pour myself another glass," Diane said, walking toward the kitchen counter. Her voice was casual, but there was a nervous edge behind it, like someone teetering on a line. "Want one?" she asked, holding up the bottle of red wine. Jake hesitated. Sure. Just a little." She poured, handed him the glass, and gave him a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Sit," she said, gesturing to the couch. He obeyed, settling into the soft cushions while she took the seat beside him, not too close, not yet. Just enough for the tension to build. The lamp behind her cast a golden glow, making her skin seem softer, warmer. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear and sipped her wine slowly. "You've grown up a lot," she said after a long silence, her eyes on him, not just looking, but seeing. "You're not like the others your age. You're mature. Thoughtful. Real." Jake smiled awkwardly, his throat tightening. Thanks. I guess." She leaned back slightly, looking at him with curiosity. "You've always been kind to me. Even before everything, even when I wasn't at my best. You never judged." Jake tried to answer, but the words felt heavy in his mouth. He took another sip of wine instead. His mind raced. What is this? What's happening? He knew this was wrong, every part of him screamed that, but another part, buried deep in loneliness and craving, didn't want to move. Didn't want to ruin the moment. Diane reached over and lightly touched his arm. You're different, Jake. You make me feel seen. Her fingers stayed on his skin just a second too long. She didn't pull away. The music, the lighting, the wine, it all blurred together. She inched closer, her bare knee brushing against his jeans. Jake's heart slammed against his ribcage. I don't feel alone when you're here, she whispered. He didn't know what to say. He didn't know if he could say anything. Then, slowly, Diane leaned in. Jake froze, not in fear, but in paralysis. Her face was inches from his. Her breath smelled of red wine and vanilla. Her lips brushed his cheek, then hovered near his. He could have pulled back. He should have. But he didn't. She kissed him softly at first, testing. Jake's eyes fluttered shut. The glass in his hand trembled before he set it on the table. Her hand found the side of his neck, drawing him in deeper. The kiss deepened. Her warmth pressed against him. And in that moment, everything else disappeared. His morality begged him to stop. His mind shouted Mark's name like an alarm. But the pull of connection, of finally being wanted, drowned it out. When she whispered, "Stay a while," he didn't answer. The scene faded in emotion more than action. No details needed. Just the haunting silence that followed, the weight of choices made in shadows. Jake lay awake later, staring at the ceiling, fully aware that the line had been crossed. Not just between him and Diane, but between him and who he used to be. The morning sunlight bled through the curtains, casting a pale glow across the living room. Jake stirred awake, the scent of Diane's perfume still lingering faintly on his clothes. His eyes opened slowly, the weight of what had happened the night before crashing down like a collapsing roof. He sat up quietly on the couch, still fully dressed except for his shoes, which lay neatly by the front door. Diane was nowhere in sight. The house was silent again, eerily so. The low hum of the refrigerator was the only sound that filled the space between his thudding thoughts. Jake moved slowly, deliberately, as if any sudden motion might make the memory more real. He grabbed his shoes, slipped them on, and opened the front door without looking back. He didn't leave a note. He didn't check to see if Diane was awake. He just left. Each step home felt heavier than the last, and the moment he closed his bedroom door behind him, the guilt settled in his chest like a lead anchor. What have I done? He couldn't stop seeing Mark's face in his mind. His best friend. His only real friend. Someone who had never betrayed him, someone who trusted him like a brother. And Jake had broken something sacred. He didn't respond to Mark's texts that weekend. "Hey yo, you good? Still mad about the beach trip? Come over, man. Mom made pancakes." Jake stared at the messages but couldn't bring himself to answer. What would he say? "Hey, your mom kissed me?" No. That wasn't even half of it. Mark came back on Sunday evening, sunburned and full of stories. He expected Jake to be waiting with some excuse for skipping the trip. Instead, he got silence. By Tuesday, Mark was frustrated. He called 3 times, Jake didn't pick up. He showed up at Jake's house, but Jake claimed to be sick and wouldn't come to the door. By Thursday, Mark texted, "What the hell, man? Did I do something?" Jake finally responded, "Just going through some stuff. Sorry." When they finally met again a few days later, at a mutual friend's movie night, Mark could tell something was off. Jake was quiet, kept his distance, eyes rarely meeting his. During a break in the movie, Mark pulled Jake aside in the kitchen. "You're being weird," Mark said plainly. "You've been weird all week." Jake's heart jumped. "I've just been tired. Summer class stuff." Mark raised an eyebrow. "You're not a good liar." A tense pause followed. Then Mark added, "Did something happen?" Jake looked down at his drink. No. Nothing happened." It was the first lie he'd told his best friend. That night, Jake lay in bed again, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything. Diane's whisper. Her kiss. The feeling of her fingertips on his neck. The soft way she'd looked at him afterward, like something real had passed between them. But had it? Was it real? Or was he just filling a hole in her life, a moment of loneliness wrapped in wine and soft lighting? His mind kept cycling through it, the kiss, the warmth, the guilt, and above all, Mark's voice in his head. Did something happen? Yes. Everything happened. Jake felt torn in two by what he had done and what he didn't understand. Part of him still craved that connection, that attention Diane had given him. It had felt like more than physical. She'd looked at him like he mattered. But another part of him, the larger part, felt disgusting. Had she used him? Was he just a stand-in for her loneliness? Or did she really feel something like he had? There were no answers. Just silence. And Jake knew that silence would only grow louder if he kept pretending nothing had changed. A week passed. Jake tried to return to normal, class, home, the occasional group hangout, but inside, he was unraveling. Every time his phone buzzed, he felt a flicker of fear. Then it happened. Late one night, while Jake sat in the back of a friend's car after a fast food run, his phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. I miss you. I shouldn't, but I do. D. He stared at the message, stomach knotting. He hadn't heard from Diane since that night. The words looked innocent to anyone else, but to Jake, they carried the full weight of what they'd done. He locked the screen too late. Mark, in the passenger seat, had turned his head at just the wrong moment. Or the right one, depending on fate's sense of irony. Oh wait, what was that? Mark asked, his tone too casual. Jake's heart jumped. Nothing. Spam. But Mark had already leaned over and grabbed the phone. Jake tried to stop him, too late. Mark unlocked it with the passcode he knew by heart. The message was still there, glowing like a confession in the dark. He read it once. Then again. And the silence that followed was heavy enough to choke the car. Mark turned, his face unreadable. Is this from my mom? Jake said nothing. Is this from my F*ing mom, Jake? Jake opened his mouth, but the words didn't come fast enough. Mark's fist did. The punch landed hard, sending Jake's head against the window. Pain exploded through his temple, but worse was the look on Mark's face, rage, betrayal, disbelief. In the stunned silence, Jake finally muttered, Mark, I didn't mean for it to happen. You didn't mean for it to happen? Mark shouted. You slept with my mom, man. God, I trusted you like a brother. Jake tried to speak again, but Mark shoved him back into the seat. Get out of the car, Mark growled. The others in the car, friends they'd known since freshman year, stared in shock. No one spoke. No one defended Jake. He got out without another word. The door slammed. The car drove off. The fallout was instant and merciless. Mark blocked Jake on everything. So did most of their mutual friends. The group chats went silent on Jake's phone. Invitations stopped. When he passed them on campus or in town, they turned away like he didn't exist. Jake tried to explain, to text Mark 100 versions of "I'm sorry," but none were answered. He understood. How could Mark ever forgive this? It wasn't just about sex. It was trust. Brotherhood. Something that had been built for years, torn down in one stupid, impulsive moment. And the betrayal ran both ways. Jake hadn't just crossed a line, he had nuked the whole map. At night, he'd lie awake, replaying the fight, the look in Mark's eyes, the sound of that single text message arriving like a bomb. He wanted to take it all back. He wanted to believe it hadn't happened. But it had. And nothing would undo it. For a while, Jake thought Diane might reach out again. Maybe to explain. Maybe to apologize. Or even just to talk. But she didn't. No calls. No texts. Nothing. A few weeks later, Jake heard from a mutual acquaintance that Diane had sold the house and moved out of town. No one knew where. Rumors circulated. Some said she left to be closer to family. Others whispered she left to avoid the scandal, to protect her reputation, especially after Mark had told a few close friends what happened. Jake never saw her again. And maybe that was for the best. Because what remained between them wasn't romance. It wasn't even resentment. It was silence. Heavy. Absolute. Final.